It was late that night on June 28, 1969, when a riot broke out at the Stonewall Inn. Stonewall was a popular hangout for gays, drag queens, and trans folk. It had been raided by police before, its patrons lined up and judged. Those wearing less than 4 articles of clothing associated with the gender they were assigned at birth were arrested. But tonight was different. Tonight they fought back. The riots, which lasted 5 days, were instigated by trans women, drag queens, and street youth. They were people who had nothing to lose. It was Marsha P. Johnson's birthday. She threw a shot glass through a plate glass window and demanded her civil rights. There had been homophile groups before Stonewall. The Madison Society, the Daughters of Bilitis, and the Society for Individual Rights and other groups, however, encouraged members to assimilate into the prevailing heteronormative society. In 1965, members of the Madison Society and Daughters of Bilitis picketed outside the White House, protesting the treatment of Cuban and American gays and lesbians. Organizers wanted to project an air of respectability and normalcy, so they asked that men wear ties and jackets and women wear skirts. Stonewall was only one in a string of protests led by trans women and drag queens in the 60s. In 1965, trans women and drag queens picketed at Dewey's, a 24-hour lunch counter in Philadelphia, after management refused them service. At Cooper's Donuts in Los Angeles in 1959 and Compton Cafeteria in San Francisco in 1966, riots broke out when the police tried to force out trans women and drag queens. The riots at Stonewall saw little press coverage, but they helped galvanize younger members of the queer community. The groups that began forming after Stonewall were different. Their members did not care about fitting into heteronormative society. Indeed, many of them, especially trans women, non-binary people, and drag queens, could not assimilate even if they wanted. While conditions for many women had improved by the 60s, trans women were not so lucky. Many trans women were kicked out or ran away at a young age. Sylvia Rivera began living on the streets at 11 years old. They had few options, and many trans women ended up homeless. Many also had to rely on prostitution because their bodies were their only resource.
Because I found out that my body was worth the money in those days. I found out if you're a pretty boy or a pretty little transvestite, you can make a couple little dollars, and that's when I learned how to hustle. And then I found out the prettier you look as a little boy, or the prettier you look as a little boy made up as a girl, that's the most money you're going to make. And the best way to do it is with your own natural hair. Wigs and stuff like that were in the 60s, but the ones that used to make the most money was the boys that looked like girls and could wear their own hair with just a little bit of makeup and have a little hormone tits, because that's when the girls' hormones start coming out in the 60s, just before the Stonewall riot. And people were just starting to really get into it.
At the time, everybody was fighting to get their rights. The blacks wanted theirs, women wanted their feminist rights done. You know, everybody wanted to be dealt with as human beings, you know what I mean? And so the gay culture was no different than anybody else.
The era before Stonewall was a hard era. There was always the gay bashings on the drag queens by heterosexual men, women, and the police. We learned to live with it because it was part of the lifestyle at that time, I guess. But none of us were very happy about it.
The part of the penal code which applied to drag queens was section 240.35, section 4. Being masked or in any manner disguised by unusual or unnatural attire or facial alteration, loiters, remains, or congregates in a public place with other
At that time, we
persons
lived
so
at the
masked
Arista
or
Hotel.
except that such
We
conduct
sit around, just try to figure out when this harassment would come to an end. And we would always dream that one day it would come to an end. And we prayed and we looked for it. We wanted to be human beings.
There was never any reason to feel that anything of any unusual situation would occur that night.
You could actually feel it in the air.
For some reason, things were different this night. As we were bringing the prisoners out, they were resisting.
People started gathering in front of the Sheridan Square Park right across the street from Stonewall. People were upset. No, we're not going to go. And people started screaming and hollering.
One drag queen, as we put her in the car, opened the door on the other side and jumped out. Uh, at which time we had to chase that person, and he was caught, put back into the car. He made another attempt to get out the other door, and at that point we had to handcuff the person. From this point on, things really began to get crazy.
Up until then, the police in every city rules the gay community bars and stuff. They go up to there and they take those nightsticks and hit the door jamb, and you're supposed to step away from a partner of the same sex if you're dancing with them. If you're at a table, you're supposed to move apart and sit and be casually talking within so many feet away from each other. For whatever reason, I have no idea what that was. No one can tell you definitively, well, this is what it was and this is why it happened. There is no what it was and why it happened. It was just the right time and the right place. Because when they came to get us out of there, nobody moved. They started chanting, "Don't arrest the girls, don't arrest the girls." And something happened, either something like a boom. I don't know if it was a firecracker. They say someone threw a beer bottle. Someone else did. One of the girls took her heel and broke a plate glass window. I don't know what the hell it was. All I know is that all of a sudden, everybody was fighting. And I had learned from being in jail that if you're in that kind of a situation, the thing to do is to piss the police off so he knocks you out, then you don't get hurt. Because if you stand there and fight them, they will break every bone in your body. So I got knocked out early. Came to as they were dragging me, and putting me in the back of some car. And then we went to court and they let everybody go.
A group of persons attempting to uproot one of the parking meters, in which they did succeed, and they then used that parking meter as a battering ram to break down the door. And they did, in fact, open the door. They crashed it in. And at that point was when they began throwing Molotov cocktails into the place. It was a situation that we didn't know how we were going to be able to
I
control.
remember someone throwing a Molotov cocktail. I don't know who the person was, but I mean, I saw that and I just said to myself in Spanish, I said, "Oh my God, the revolution is finally here." And I just started screaming, "Freedom! We're free at last," and it felt really good. I wanted to do every destructive thing that I could think of at that time to hurt anyone that had hurt us.
I've been in gay liberation ever since it first started in 1969. I was one of the first drag queens to try and help the drag queens and other people have food at the Alternate U. Alternate U was one of the places that we first tried to help college queens open their doors to gay liberation. When I started getting in newspapers, on TV set for gay pride parades, I was one of the queens that helped feed the queens that were hungry. And I started the Star House, but I didn't actually start the Star House. Sylvia Rivera started the Star House. And I was just one of the queens that was behind her, like the vice president of the Star.
In 1970, Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson formed STAR, Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, later changed to Street Transgender Action Revolutionaries. Marsha and I just decided it was time to help each other and help our other kids. It was the first trans outreach program. STAR was for the street gay people, the street homeless people, and anybody that needed help at the time. They opened up STAR House to help homeless trans youth. We fed people and clothed people. We kept the building going. We went out and hustled the streets. We paid the rent. We didn't want the kids out in the streets hustling. They would go out and rip off food. There was always food in the house, and everyone had fun. Later, we had a chapter in New York, one in Chicago, and one in California and England. It lasted 2 or 3 years.
in 1973, Sylvia Rivera had to fight her way onto stage at the Gay Liberation Rally that year. She was being told by organizers that she did not represent the community, that they did not want queens representing the community, that queens were anti-feminist, and she fought her way onto the stage that day. And she's talked about being arrested, beaten, raped, that she knows people who have been arrested, beaten, and raped, and that she warned us that our LGBT movement should not become a movement for white middle-class people. 41 years ago.
I've been trying to get up here all day for your gay brothers and your gay sisters in jail that write me every motherfucking week and ask for your help. And you all don't do a goddamn thing for them. Have you ever been beaten up and raped in jail? Now think about it. They've been beaten up and raped after they haven't spent much of their money in jail to get their cell phones and tried to get their sex change. The women have tried to fight for their sex changes or to become women of the women's liberation. And they write STAR, not the women's group. They do not write women. They do not write men. They write STAR because we're trying to do something for them. I have been to jail. I have been raped and beaten many times by men, heterosexual men that do not belong in the homosexual shelter. But do you do anything for them? No. You all tell me to go and hide my tail between my legs. I will not longer put up with this shit. I have been beaten. I have had my nose broken. I have been thrown in jail. I have lost my job. I have lost my apartment for gay liberation. And you all treat me this way? What the fuck's wrong with you all? Think about that. I do not believe in a revolution, but you all do. I believe in the gay power. I believe in us getting our rights, or else I would not be out there fighting for our rights. That's all I wanted to say to your people. If you all want to know about the people that are in jail, and do not forget Bambi Lamore and Dora Marks, Kenny Messner, and other gay people that are in jail, come and see the people at Star House on 12th Street, on 640 East 12th Street, between B and C, apartment 14. The people that are trying to do something for all of us, and not men and women that belong to a white middle class, white club. And that's what you all belong to. Revolution now!
And that's why I say every pride is trans pride, because, honey, there would be no pride without Marsha and Sylvia. You know what I'm saying? So every pride is trans pride. You know, people now, mainstream gays and lesbians, fail to, or don't even want to acknowledge that fact, that, you know, Stonewall movement was, you know, basically founded off of Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson. And to know that that's my history, I feel like I'm continuing to carry their torch in this society where gay and lesbian is still mainstream and trans is like underlooked and not acknowledged. And so, you know, I remember watching a video of Sylvia Rivera talking at a rally march where she was actually getting booed by the gays and lesbians in the crowd, telling her to get off the stage. And she basically said, "What do you mean? I am doing this for you. I am doing this for us." You know what I'm saying? We are in this together, and for you to sit here and boo me is just ridiculous. And that's how I feel when it comes to the gays and lesbians in our community, because they feel like they have some type of hierarchy over trans people because they have that cisnormativity.
The preoccupation with transition and with surgery objectifies trans people, and then we don't get to really deal with the real lived experiences. The reality of trans people's lives is that so often we're targets of violence. We experience discrimination disproportionately to the rest of the community. Our unemployment rate is twice the national average. If you're a trans person of color, it's 4 times the national average. The homicide rate in the LGBT community is highest amongst trans women. And when we focus on transition, we don't actually get to talk about those things. There's a young woman named Ilan Nettles who on August 17th was just walking down the street with some friends, minding her own business, and she was catcalled by a couple of guys. And one of them, once they realized she was trans, she was beaten into a coma, and 5 days later she died. This is the reality of so many trans people's lives in this country, trans women of color whose lives are in danger simply for being who they are. And we're looking for justice for Ilan's murder, and we're looking for justice for so many trans people across this country. And by focusing on bodies, we don't focus on the lived realities of that oppression and that discrimination.
We need to fight. We need to keep pushing forward. We need to let people be aware and see us. You know what I'm saying? You hear all the time conservative groups say that we're forcing our sexuality. We're forcing. Well, yes, we are, because if we don't, then you won't see us. So hello the fuck out. I'm here. We still do not get that same respect in media. We're still portrayed to be as sex workers. Not saying that I have anything against that. I was one myself. But I'm just saying, like, the same stereotypes that we have. You never can go on TV and yes, Laverne is playing a good role, but what is she still playing? A stereotype of a black trans woman in a prison. I feel like there are no TV shows or any media outlet that portray trans women as business women, as doctors, as lawyers, as entrepreneurs. And there's so many. I was just reading an article of the first trans BMX rider. You know what I'm saying?
And I think that it's a lack of people understanding their privilege. And I think that's a lot of the work that needs to be done, that I feel like I am a part of helping do, is unpacking that for a lot of people. And sometimes they see trans issues, and it's like, I'm also a trans black woman who's young, who grew up poor, who engaged in sex work as a teenager to pay for the medical care that she needed. There's a lot of layers there, and I can't never just communicate on just gender alone.
Right.
And I bring back, Kimberly Crenshaw, like, it's about intersectionality. It's about the multiplicities of our identities. And so it's hard for me sometimes when I go into a mainstream space where they're just only wanting me to deal with trans issues.
Right.
This year, a movie came out about the Stonewall riots. It was written by a white gay man and directed by another white gay man. And the protagonist was not Marsha P. Johnson, not Sylvia Rivera, not Miss Major Griffin Gracie, nor is it Stormy DeLarvery, a butch lesbian who was also involved in the riots. No, it's, unsurprisingly, told from the point of view of a fictional white gay cis man. Over the 46 years since Stonewall happened, the mainstream white cis male gay community has been steadily attempting to erase the impact of trans women on queer history. It is sad and very frustrating as a queer woman to see the changes, what often looks like backsliding, to the queer community in our lifetime. Yes, there have been advances in gay rights. Yes, gays can serve in the military, and yes, gays can get married. But those should have never been made the cornerstone issues of the queer rights movement. They were made the cornerstone issues because they directly impacted middle-class, cis-gay white men who have used their privilege and place of power within the queer community to make themselves the ambassadors, and you can't see me, but I am using air quotes, of the queer community, and who turn around and exclude anyone who is not like them. We often talk about the queer community like it's a single community, but really it's not. It's many smaller communities that are lumped together because we are seen as other. There are people within the queer community who are queer themselves, who are not allies to other queer people. Our communities are affected by racism, misogyny, classism, transphobia, biphobia, and acephobia. There are so many people who think that now that the gay issue of marriage equality is solved, we're done and queer rights are accomplished. But that is so wrong and so harmful. I have had allies argue with me when I expressed my frustrations about why marriage equality was chosen to represent the queer rights movement. Because it doesn't directly affect straight people. They don't have to change harmful behaviors. They don't have to confront how they benefit from institutionalized oppression. They really just have to change their profile picture to a rainbow filter to call themselves an ally. There are far more pressing issues affecting our communities. We've been told baby steps, that people need to be comfortable with us before we can advocate for the issues that affect the safety and livelihood of queer people. This year alone, at least 22 trans women have been murdered in the US. 19 of them were women of color. Trans women and trans women of color face increased rates of assault, poverty, and homelessness, even within the queer community. 41% of trans and non-binary people have attempted suicide. When 40% of homeless teens are queer, when queers are more likely to be affected by alcoholism and drug use, when queer kids see suicide as the only option to escape abuse, when asexuals and aromantics are being denied visibility within the queer community, when oppressors commit corrective rape and hide behind queer panic, when trans women are forced to live in fear for their lives, baby steps are useless. As someone who has had experience with allyship from both ends of the spectrum, as an ally myself and as a member of a marginalized community, it is important to educate yourself and continue to educate yourself. You don't get an ally card and then everything you say and do is fine now because you're an ally. Being an ally is a continuing process. It's a lifelong commitment to staying educated. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, and you may have to drastically shift your views. To really support a community, you need to actively seek out information, listen to their stories and experiences. It was really important to me as a queer woman to do this project as a video, to show the history of trans women like Marcia and Sylvia and Miss Major, and to allow trans voices to talk about trans issues. Because being an ally, you don't speak over a community's voices, but rather you use your own to amplify what they are saying.
I believe in as long as there's people with AIDS and as long as gay people don't have their rights all across America, there's no reason for celebration. That's how come I walk every year. That's how come I've been walking for gay rights all these years instead of riding in cars and celebrating everything. Because you never completely have your rights, one person, until you all have your rights. And I figure as long as there's one gay person that has to walk for gay rights, John, all of us should be walking for gay rights.